In today's video, I'm going to share with you 5 essential little-known scientific facts and insights that you absolutely must know about if you want to quickly and effectively treat your panic attacks. I'm also going to give you 2 unique counterintuitive techniques that have both been scientifically proven to help treat anxiety and to treat panic disorder, so you can use these techniques to make a significant positive difference in your life today. Hi, I'm Michael Norman, and as a scientist and paid on results anxiety specialist with clients from over 103 countries around the world, I've witnessed firsthand how panic attacks and panic disorder have impacted the lives of even the strongest, bravest people. Whether someone's a celebrity, a highly respected doctor, a CEO, whether they're a student, a stay-at-home mom, or anyone else, panic doesn't discriminate. Almost 1 in 3 people will experience a panic attack sometime in their lifetime, and I've been through it too. Thankfully though, there is some good news to this story because thanks to the last 3 decades of scientific research, panic is now one of the most treatable issues there is if you get the right scientifically grounded help, and that's what this video is all about. Now, years ago, Albert Einstein wisely pointed out, if I were given 1 hour to save the world, I'd spend 59 minutes defining the problem and 1 minute solving it. This is especially true when it comes to successfully treating the panic attacks you've had. Because as you'll soon discover for yourself, once you have an accurate understanding of what's been happening to you, how panic really works and what's been keeping it in your life, surprisingly the solution suddenly becomes much clearer, as does the path back to a normal panic-free life. So with all of this in mind, let's move on to the first counterintuitive fact. Fact number 1, the term panic attack is not only completely misleading, it can actually make it more difficult to recover. Words carry a lot of power. They can mislead us, they can deceive us, they can send us in the wrong direction down the wrong path, or they can illuminate deeper truths, show us where to go and help us to find our way home. And knowing this is true, I hope it's obvious why I consider it so very important you know that a panic attack is absolutely not an attack. That phrase is totally misleading, and as you'll understand before you finish this video, it can create a mindset that can make things much worse, making it harder to successfully treat panic. If we really care about solving your problem once and for all, then obviously we really care about the truth. And the overwhelming scientific evidence is that every panic attack you've ever had was not an attack at all, but surprisingly, it was just an innocent, very well-intended, overprotective mistake. To explain this more, I'm going to share with you a short clip from my Panic Free TV Foundation video series, which presents a simple but important thought experiment. Which of these 2 smoke alarms would you prefer to have protecting you in your home? Would you prefer to have a smoke alarm that sometimes fails to go off and stays silent, even though there's a deadly fire in your house? Or would you prefer to have a smoke alarm that never misses a real fire, but occasionally goes off when you burn the toast, even though there is no danger and everything is actually fine? Now, of course, we'd all prefer to have a perfect smoke alarm system that never makes any mistakes. But the reality is we live in a complex and often ambiguous world. And so if you had to choose between one of these 2 options, which would you choose? An undersensitive smoke alarm that could miss a real fire and kill you? Or an oversensitive smoke alarm that occasionally has unpleasant, noisy false alarms, but never misses a real fire and always keeps you safe? It's a simple answer, isn't it? When it comes to our survival, when it comes to our life, it's better to have a smoke alarm that errs on the side of safety, even if that means we sometimes get false alarms. So what does this have to do with panic? Well, panic attacks are nothing more than false alarms of our overprotective, life-saving fear systems. And while it probably hasn't felt that way for you in the past, the truth is that a panic attack is just a terrifying, overwhelming, overprotective mistake. It's a mistake that ironically is motivated by your brain's #1 priority in life: to keep you safe. Panic attacks are brain and body following the same better safe than sorry philosophy that every good smoke detector system uses. And it's far healthier. In fact, it's optimal in an often uncertain world to have a fear system that's biased to be oversensitive and occasionally give us false alarms than it is to have an undersensitive system that could miss real danger that could kill us. So a panic attack is just an overprotective mistake. The only real problem, and it's a big one, is that it's a terrifying mistake. It's a mistake that can leave us feeling exposed, vulnerable, and unsafe, even though no one dies from a panic attack, and even though panic could never ever make anyone truly go crazy. The false alarm of a panic attack often creates a very powerful illusion that these things could happen. And that's why I really believe that you are... So again, a panic attack is not an attack. Instead, it's a false alarm. It's a mistaken effort to protect you from a danger that's not there. Unfortunately, the reason why it's so scary, the reason why it's one of the most horrible experiences anyone could ever go through, is because a false alarm sounds the same as a real alarm. And with a panic false alarm, because we so often don't know what's going on, the confusion and uncertainty can make everything even more alarming. And that's why it's so very important that you know about fact number 2. Believe it or not, all the strange and scary symptoms you've had because of panic, especially the ones that seem the most dangerous, all they really are just harmless byproducts of a false alarm. Fortunately, thanks to a lot of research, we know how a false alarm alone can create them. We know they can't kill you, we know they can't truly make you go crazy, and we know that reassuringly, as you learn about this, it can help you immediately feel safer and more secure. Now, since we have a lot to cover in this video, I'm not going to go into all the details here, even though this is a very important topic. Since I cover this in depth in my free Panic-Free TV Foundation series, if you want to learn more, as I recommend you do, then you'll find what you're looking for when you get to episode 2 of my Foundation series. Again, it's completely free, at least for the moment, so you can watch it by visiting panicfree.tv or by clicking the information icon in the top right hand corner of this video. Okay, let's move on to fact number 3. There is a core hidden pattern behind every false alarm you've ever had. And as you'll soon see, this pattern reveals to us the fastest, most effective, most direct path back to a normal panic-free life. If you've ever been told that you have panic disorder, even though I'm not a fan of that label at all, this is the core pattern that we want to shift together so that you can finally be 100% panic-free. To explain more, here's another short clip from my Foundation series. A panic attack happens when anxiety creates body sensations and anxious thoughts, and because our brain has mistakenly learned to fear those body sensations or thoughts, it creates even more anxiety. This increased anxiety then creates even more body sensations and thoughts, and around the cycle people go. I call this the panic pattern because it's the pattern behind every scary false alarm. It's a harmless, vicious cycle that can escalate into a full fight or flight response. So let me share with you one of the most common examples of this pattern because it helps illustrate this more clearly. Since anxiety makes everyone's heart beat a little faster, if something happens in our lives that makes us fearful or anxious, naturally our heart will speed up. Again, this is a completely natural and healthy response that we all have. But if someone is scared of that, if they're scared of having a faster heartbeat, then anytime they get anxious enough for whatever reason, it can trigger the panic pattern. Anxiety would make their heart beat faster, and a faster heartbeat would make them more anxious, which would further increase their heartbeat, and a harmless but scary vicious cycle would ensue. This is the core pattern behind every panic false alarm, and it can work if people fear a faster heartbeat or any other anxiety-related body sensation that they happen to be scared of. Again, a panic false alarm happens when anxiety creates body sensations and anxious thoughts, and because our brain has mistakenly learned to fear those body sensations and thoughts, that creates even more anxiety. And that anxiety then creates even more body sensations and thoughts, and around the cycle people go. Now, what you might be asking is, what's the deal with panic that's triggered by external situations like driving or flying, shopping, leaving the house, or other things? Why does that happen? Well, if it happens, it's because those external situations have become associated with anxiety, and so they feed right into the panic pattern. Anything that triggers enough anxiety to create a feared body sensation can trigger the whole vicious cycle, and therefore a panic attack. Now, there are several reasons why understanding the panic pattern is so important. The most important by far is that it reveals to us the fastest, most effective, most direct path back to a normal panic-free life. I'll talk about this more in just a moment, but first, it's essential we cover fact number 4. following common sense tends to backfire, keeps people stuck, and reinforces the panic pattern. If you've struggled to find the answers you need, then please know it's definitely not your fault. Even though panic is one of the most treatable issues there is, unfortunately, it's also one of the most counterintuitive. What seems as if it should work with panic doesn't, and what does work tends to fly in the face of common sense. There are several important examples of this, but for now in this video, I'm just going to mention one very briefly. And that example of how common sense tends to backfire with panic is trying to fight it. Trying to stop, suppress, or fight back against panic is one of the most natural responses in the world. Any sensible, intelligent person would try to do it. But unfortunately, as a huge amount of research shows, when it comes to panic, what we resist doesn't just persist. Unfortunately, it often becomes stronger, more resilient, and more enduring. Because when we try and fight panic, it typically leads to more intense, more enduring panic-related body sensations and thoughts, not less. In the short term, this fuels the panic pattern, and in the long term, it increases the chance of further frequent ongoing false alarms. While I explain this in depth in my Foundation series, I hope you can now appreciate yet another reason why I'm definitely not a fan of the term panic attack. When people are misled into believing that panic is an attack, or a trick, or a monster, or any other unhelpful conflict-based metaphor, then it's only natural that they'd try and fight it, which unfortunately not only doesn't help, it actively makes the situation worse. Believe it or not, even doing absolutely nothing is a far more effective strategy than trying to fight panic. And if that statement seems a little crazy to you, then consider that doing essentially nothing was a key part of a pioneering approach to treating panic, developed by my compatriot Claire Weekes more than 60 years ago. Weekes was an Australian doctor, and she was the pioneer of acceptance-based approaches for panic and anxiety, which are so common today. She urged people not to try and fight panic, but instead to utterly accept it, to float through it, to use her words, and to let time pass until it goes away. How could this be helpful? Well, if we go back to the scene I showed you earlier in this video with the burning toast, when we try and fight a false alarm, it's like pushing that toast back into the toaster and turning the toaster up. Even though it's still just burning toast, it leads to much more smoke and as a result, a much longer lasting false alarm. However, when we utterly accept a false alarm, it's like turning that toaster off. Even though the smoke may linger for a while, if we let time pass, as Weekes used to say, the smoke will clear and things will more quickly return to normal. Now, obviously, I'm well aware that trying to accept a false alarm is far easier said than done, and this is why acceptance-based approaches take time and practice to work. Weekes was very honest about this, and she urged people to be realistic so they would stick with the process even through setbacks. To use her own words, if you use an acceptance-based approach for panic and anxiety, don't count the days, don't count the months, let time pass, because even with complete acceptance, it takes about 2 months to desensitize the body. While this has been shown to be true for all acceptance-based approaches scientifically studied, even though acceptance is a slow process, it does help if people stick with it. And for the 1960s, accepting panic and anxiety was a revolutionary idea which helped hundreds of thousands of people who way back at that point in history had little else that worked. Now, since we're covering such an important topic here, that of not fighting panic, I want to give you a second, even more useful strategy that you can use to actually stop a false alarm if you have one. This is strategy number 2. Now, before I share this strategy with you, I need to warn you up front that when I explain it to you, you'll probably think it's totally crazy. That's totally okay, but also keep in mind that we know from the research that this counterintuitive strategy is more effective than many of the most commonly used approaches to treating panic. It's more effective than breathing exercises, it's more effective than relaxation techniques, and it's more effective than cognitive approaches where someone tries to use logic to dismiss, talk back to, or correct anxious thoughts. What's this crazy strategy that can actually help? It's using a paradoxical approach where if you get a false alarm, instead of trying to fight it, you voluntarily try to make it stronger and last longer. Now, how could such a crazy approach ever work? Well, there are several reasons beyond the scope of this video, but just to give you one reason here, I'd like you to consider this. Have you ever tried to force yourself to fall asleep, but as a result, you found yourself being more awake? Have you ever tried so hard to forget something that you ended up thinking about it even more? Or have you ever tried to force yourself to be attracted to someone you didn't have any feelings for, and as a consequence, you became even more aware that that person wasn't right for you? If you've ever had any one of these experiences, then you might appreciate that when we try and force an involuntary, automatic, mental or emotional process, sometimes all that effort backfires and it inhibits that very process. This is something we can use to our advantage with panic, and it's why when I first meet a new client, if they're having a false alarm because they've had to leave their comfort zone even to talk to me, I never ask them to relax. Instead, very often, I ask them to voluntarily make the false alarm a lot bigger. I ask them to voluntarily give me the biggest false alarm they've ever had. And what happens universally is they can't. Paradoxically, it relaxes them. Now, obviously, when I work one-on-one with clients, there is a unique art and skill to making sure this works optimally for each individual. But the use of paradoxical approaches like this isn't something I invented. Famous therapists like Alfred Adler, Viktor Frankl, and Milton Erickson, as far back as 90 to 100 years ago, each independently discovered that instead of trying to fight with a problem, sometimes you can get far better results by paradoxically trying to encourage it. When done correctly, even with self-application, even in a basic form as I'm sharing with you here, this approach has been shown to be a useful first step for helping people with panic. Again, the approach is, if you get a false alarm, instead of trying to fight it, you voluntarily try as hard as you can to force it, trying with all your willpower to compel it to instantly become the biggest, longest lasting false alarm you've ever had. Now, as useful as this approach can be as a first step, obviously it's just that, a first step. It's a tool to help people realize that panic doesn't work the way you think it does, and that paradoxically, you can get much more control when you don't follow common sense. Now, I want to shift mindsets and very briefly introduce you to a totally different orientation to treating panic. Because obviously, as nice as it is to have ways to accept, cope with, or even stop a false alarm after it happens, obviously approaches like that are highly reactive. You have to remember what to do, you have to be able to consciously apply that strategy in the heat of the moment, which isn't easy at all. And worst of all, even if you have a really good technique that works, you've still had to go through the unpleasant experience of having your day interrupted by a false alarm. Obviously, none of that is optimal at all. So what's the solution? Well, I'm sure you've heard the old saying that prevention is better than cure, and obviously, what's far more useful and far more effective is if we can help you automatically prevent future false alarms so they never even happen in the first place. Because for me, panic-free is not about coping better with false alarms. Because if you have to cope with or accept false alarms, that means you still get them. Panic-free doesn't even mean that you're immediately able to stop a false alarm as soon as it begins, because at best that's just a good start. What panic-free really means is that panic has truly become a total non-issue for you in your life. It means you're naturally and effortlessly as panic-free, carefree, and normal as anyone else you know, without you having to even think about it. And what's the fastest, most effective way to help you truly become panic-free? Well, this leads us into fact number 5. We can automatically prevent future false alarms by quickly ending the panic pattern. Whether you've had just a few false alarms so far, whether you've had them for years or even decades, or whether you've been diagnosed as having panic disorder, if we can change your automatic responses so that instead of feeling anxious, you're automatically calm, relaxed, and secure in response to the very triggers that triggered the panic pattern for you in the past, then there can't be a vicious cycle and you won't be able to panic. This is the focus of all my work, and obviously if you like this video and you want more of my help, then obviously I have so much more to share with you. While you'll notice I have a range of resources on my website, including ways you can work with me personally, I recommend you start with my free foundation series first, which goes into everything we've talked about here, plus a lot more in much more detail. Again, my foundation series is totally free at the moment, and you can watch the first episode in full right now by clicking the link in the description, by visiting my website at panicfree.tv or by clicking the information icon in the top right-hand corner of this video. Thousands of people from all walks of life have gone through my Foundation series, and since so many of them have openly said that it's made a real positive difference in their lives, I think you'll discover too when you watch it for yourself that it also makes a real positive difference for you. I hope this video has obviously been helpful for you, and if it has, then please leave me a comment below so that I know you'd like me to make more videos like this video here on YouTube. Also, if you'd like to be immediately notified as soon as I publish new helpful videos like this video here, then obviously subscribe to my YouTube channel and automatically this will happen. Remember, panic is one of the most treatable issues there is if you get the right scientifically grounded help. You are not alone, and no matter what you've been through, there is so much we can do to make an immediate positive difference in your life. Thank you so much for watching. I hope again that this video was incredibly useful for you. I'm Michael Norman, and this has been yet another episode of Panic Free TV.